So yesterday I travelled down to Exeter to meet up with Brendan Barry, who's currently shooting a project with a camera that he's built out of a shipping container. He makes all kinds of crazy cameras out of a very vast amount of resources. And I actually discovered his work previously when I saw that he'd made a camera out of a loaf of bread. So yeah, here's a demonstration and an introduction to Brendan Barry and how he takes photos with a shipping container.
Hi there, I'm Brendan Barry. I build cameras and also transform spaces into cameras. This particular camera here, this is my shipping container camera, which I've just completed. It's a shipping container, obviously, that I've painted black and then created this kind of wall at the front of it, which allows me to kind of pull it backwards and forwards, allowing kind of access in. One of the kind of other conditions or the things I wanted to make sure that this particular camera was able to do and was turn into a gallery, an exhibition space at the end of this project. So I'm parked up here in Northern Hay Gardens in Exeter for about 2.5 weeks, making photographs of kind of people that want to buy, but also inviting kind of community groups, local charities, schools, education centres, things like that in for workshops and portrait sessions. And we made some still lifes today, which has been quite fun. It's like a kind of community camera, I suppose. It's got a built-in dark room, so I've been making giant paper negatives. Let me grab one. Here's one of the negatives. This is a group from Exeter College, just across the road, where I teach. So the camera projects light straight onto photographic paper, which we develop in the darkroom at the back. After that, we contact print it and create a positive, just like this. So it's basically the world's biggest, slowest, and most impractical Polaroid camera you can get. This is currently just a big shipping container, but if I close this door, turn the light off, then we have a big black box with a stream of light coming through one end, which is the lens obviously. And then if I pull up this screen, we can see the outside world projected in. So the further away from the lens that I move the screen, the more, well, the way, that's how it affects the focus basically. So the closer this is to the lens, you can see the background in focus here, so there's the kind of horizon infinity. The further away I move it, the more closer objects come into focus, or subject matter. So there's our subject out the front. And if I get him to take a step forward, James, can you take a step forward? And as he gets bigger in the frame, I need to move the screen further back to focus on him. And again, so as he comes into focus here. So the way I can kind of choose the scale of the subject matter is basically the distance that they're stood from the lens. The closer they are to the lens, the further back I have to the focus, and the bigger they get within the frame. So I can move back in, and here we can see our background come into focus. What's really nice about this as an educational tool is it's a really kind of obvious, if you like, visual kind of cue to things like depth of field. So as I move this forward, we can see these kind of petals on the floor come into focus. And if I tilt this, I can create a sort of tilt shift. So you can see all of the ground here coming into focus. And if I get this right, yeah, there's the petals there, and the ground going back. Obviously James is out of focus now. If I move him back forward, there it is. Okay. The other thing that's quite useful for this in terms of education is I can close down the aperture on the lens, and we can see the image obviously get darker. If I hold this out, get those petals in, as the image, if I open up the lens, the image becomes brighter. If I close it down, it gets darker, but we can literally see the depth of field increasing. So if I zoom it open, you can see how James comes in and out of focus as the aperture closes. So when I'm teaching students, you can kind of say, right, so what's happening here? The aperture is closing down and the depth of field is getting larger. But of course the image is getting darker, which would mean we need a longer shutter speed in order to capture correct exposure. So it's a really good kind of way of explaining and demonstrating something visually, something that's actually quite tricky to get your head around conceptually. So effectively, obviously, we're in a giant camera and you can see it working and operating from the inside. So, if I then want to make a picture with this, because currently this is basically a camera obscura, a dark room that is used for viewing the outside world. So back in the day, painters would have used machines like this to kind of trace and sketch out scenes. And obviously when the advent of photography came along, was able to create light sensitive materials that would capture the light pouring through. That's how photography was born as we know it. In order for me to turn this from a camera obscura into a camera, all I need to do is pull around this screen. Here in front of the lens. And we've got our subject stood out there again. All I do to make a picture of this is take this frame, place it around the subject matter. If I want to make a portrait, I can obviously choose if they're full bodies, stood further away, or coming forward, just a headshot. So I can frame up the image, just move this gently backwards and forwards to get the focus right. James, can you take a big step forward? And a little bit back. As I said, I just move this backwards and forwards just to fine tune the focus. So there's good. Right. There we are. Right, okay, hold that position really still. Right, now I need to attach my shutter. So I have a shutter that I've butchered out of an old Sinar camera that's basically gaffer taped to the front lens standard. So I double check my framing, happy with that. Okay, stay exactly as you are, don't move a muscle. All the exposure times and things like that are estimated with this, to be honest. It's a little bit temperamental. The paper has a is really slow. It has an ISO of about 3, and the lens is quite slow itself as well. The maximum aperture is 12.5 on this particular lens, so it means we're often using quite long shutter speeds. So I tend to just guess it really, but just keep our fingers crossed. So I lower the paper in. I have this little kind of peephole here, which allows me to see what's happening outside, so I can make sure that subject matter is still, or nobody's photobombed the picture, or cars driven behind them or something. So, right, you ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. And there's my exposure. This piece of paper comes down to the back, so just put the darkening light on. There we go. And then back here I have darkroom setup. So first tray is developer. So what's happening here is basically in the paper there are chemicals that are sensitive to light, and when the light hits those chemicals coming through the lens, they react and something's happening. Then when they go into the tray, there's chemicals in the tray that react with the chemicals in the paper that have just reacted and seen the light, and that's how our image comes alive. So this is obviously our paper negative, everything's in reversed. So where there's brighter quantities of light, they come in through the lens. So James's top, for instance, is white, so lots of light bouncing through, which is turning the paper black. And the darker areas in the scene, so his hair, for instance, which is dark, not so much light is bouncing off that, coming through the lens, hitting the paper, so the paper is staying white. If you pulled a piece of paper out of the bag, put it straight into the developer, it would stay white. If you took it outside and exposed it to full sunlight, it would just turn black. That's it. So currently this paper is still sensitive to light because it's just in the developer. So if I turn the lights on now, it would just go pitch black. So it usually takes a couple of minutes in here for the image to develop properly, but let's skip it a little bit. So this is the stop bath. So this just stops the developing process and helps to kind of rinse off some of those chemicals so we don't get too much contamination. And then into the fix. This is what fixes the image and stops it from being sensitive to light. So once it's been in here for 30 seconds or so, we'll be able to see it with the white lights on. it is, there's a negative. Obviously it's quite dull day today, so that was a 2-second exposure, which means you've got a bit of kind of movement and blur. It's not super pin sharp, but you know, you don't work with this process to get really sharp, perfect images. So, take this, you need to create a contact print by turning this into a positive. So, my little a fresh piece of paper. So this is exactly the same stuff. This is the same paper that I used to make the negative. Place that down here. Just give this a quick wash. Try and get as much of those chemicals off as possible. So you can do this process. So you know, this is a classic contact print basically. So the same way that you make a contact print from a roll of 35mm negs or medium format, large format. It's exactly the same thing, but instead of taking your negative, putting it on top of a piece of photographic paper with a sheet of glass on top to sort of connect them together so they're nice and flat so you get a sharp image, I'm using a wet negative, which actually creates a better contact. You get a really, really clean and tight contact between the two sheets of paper. So you can do this in the dark room with a dry negative on top of a fresh sheet of paper with a sheet of glass over it, but this means I can complete the whole process inside the camera. It's a little bit rudimentary, but it's part of the fun. So I'm just rubbing it now just to get any air bubbles and things out. You're always left with a few kind of chemical marks and watermarks and stuff, but again, that's kind of part of the beauty of working in this way. You get all these unexpected kind of marks on the paper. So exposure. And then take this paper, place it back through the trays just as we did before, and hopefully, if I've guessed that right, we should have a positive image appear in this tray. And there it is. The nice thing about this is that the basics of this process are really, really simple. Like, anybody can do exactly what I'm doing here in their bedroom at home, for instance. So if you wanted to recreate this entire process, all you would need to do is black out your bedroom window, for instance, or any room in your house that has a window that looks on a view that you want to photograph. And then easy ways to black out window. Obviously you can use material and all sorts of things, but then you start to have to pin things and hang things up. Cardboard works really well. Just cut off strips of cardboard and tape it on. But the easiest thing is just to take tin foil, spray the window, so dampen your window basically a little bit, and then just lay tin foil across it. It's light, tight, you don't need to do any kind of sticking. It just holds on there. Don't leave it for too long because it will dry and stick and you have to scrape it off or something. But days is fine. So then your room's completely black, and then you just need to create a hole into the tinfoil somewhere. And if you create a pinhole, light will come through that. And if you hold a piece of card or white paper or kind of, you know, some sort of muslin or kind of transparent material, the image from outside will project onto that. If your hole is really small, you'll get a really sharp image, but it'll be really dull because not a lot of light's coming through the hole. The bigger you make the pinhole, the brighter your image will be, but the more blurry it will be. So if you want to create a bright image, then the best thing to do is use a lens. Now, lenses I use here are quite specialist, big and chunky and expensive, but you can use any old thing. You can use a lens out of a pair of glasses. Magnifying glass works really well. Just go to Poundland and yeah, pick up a £1 magnifying glass, put that in, and you'll get an image projected behind the lens. Depending on the size of the magnifying glass, or you know, like I said, you can use the lens from a pair of glasses, will depend on the focal distance, the distance from the lens that you're focusing, and the kind of size of that image circle. But using, yeah, or you can use a lens off your camera, any old thing basically. In fact, well, here's our positive print, there's James there. I've got a lens here actually that I made out of a magnifying glass. So this is magnifying glass off eBay, just in there. So you could just place that into over the hole in your window, and that would project an image. And then you can change the aperture by just getting pieces of card with different size holes in them. This is a mechanical iris aperture that I made. This is just out of copper sheets, a bit of plywood with a magnifying glass lens, and this works really well. I'll maybe shoot with this in a bit. So then you've got a camera obscura, you've got the image from the outside projected in, and then if you want to create an image with it in exactly the same way I've done here, then all you need to do is pull something up behind the window. So you could just pull your wardrobe or something up in front of it, and then masking tape a piece of paper to it, photographic paper. Get some trays of chemicals. You can buy these chemicals online, super cheap for a small pack. And if you haven't got photographic trays, just, I don't know, use an oven dish or sink or any old tray, anything that you can find that will hold liquids. And then make an exposure onto your paper, develop it through your trays, contact print it in the way that I've just done now, and you've got yourself your own massive camera.